Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the JoyPad podcast. I am one of your hosts, Mike Fleming. It's nice to see all of you again. This week, I am personally drinking a Warsteiner Hefeweizen. It's delicious, and I'm greatly enjoying it. With me, as always, are my three wonderful friends and other hosts of the show. We'll start with Michael Pinto. How are you doing this evening? What are you drinking? And also, what are you playing?
I am doing quite well. The air conditioner is turned off, so you guys don't hear what sounds like a small engine running in my room. I am drinking a Susquehanna Brewing Company Blueberry Thrill right here on camera. You guys can't see it. You can't see my web camera, but the audience can. Uh, I thought this was going to be my favorite out of the sampler pack I bought. It's not, but it's still good.
Oh,
And I have been playing, of course, Stardew Valley, but I think I'm finally breaking that addiction for now. Until the next big patch comes out. We've been playing a lot of War Thunder, of course, and I have dovin? What's the past tense of dived? I have dived headfirst into XCOM Chimera Squad, and now that I'm fully committed to it, I am enjoying it greatly.
You know, I have this problem. I purchase games and then I don't play them for a while, and I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta play that. And that's one of those games that I bought, completely forgot it came out.
Well,
I have the same
yeah,
issue.
for me, and I think most of us were in the same boat. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to fully commit myself to any other game until I finished FF7R. So now that that's done, I'm like, all right, it's XCOM time.
Yeah. My problem also is that I didn't beat XCOM 2 officially, so like
And
I
you
don't
never
think it
played
matters.
XCOM 1.
And I never played XCOM 1. I don't think it matters for like playing the Chimera Squad DLC or expansion. I don't know what you'd even call it, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, I really should play that. So no, I personally have not even touched that game. But Tom, what are you up to? Have you played Chimera Squadron?
No, I have it and I haven't played it. I also, whenever this comes up, I always harken back to the fact that I own XCOM 2 on two platforms, both PC and PS4, and I have played it on neither system. And yet, after purchasing both of those games on that same game on both platforms, I've played XCOM for probably another 80 hours. Tonight, however, pardon me if I'm a little strange. I just finished work, quite a late work day, to be honest with you. But I'm drinking a Blue Raz Bang energy drink because I'm a sleepy peepee.
That's exactly what you need right now.
It will add excitement and fervor and raspberries, which are blue, to my life.
Well, I'm just going to say I am happy that you finish work and literally the first thing you do is you log into our Skype call and get this podcast started.
Dedication.
Greetings of the day, Tom. Greetings of the day.
Greeting. So for everyone that's seen some of our posts, which have begun using the phrase "greetings of the day" since I believe episode 4. This actually came about when I was working late one day at about 7 o'clock my time, when a fine friend in a foreign land sent me an instant message. He also was working for my company, and it just said, "Greetings of the day." And I said, "Man, I am ready. I am ready to log off of this computer right now while I'm finishing this drudgery task, and you're coming at me with greetings of the day. I'm not ready for this."
Well, it's funny. It's funny you say that because I have a colleague as well who I actually haven't worked with in like a year, if not more. Her spiel that she puts in every single email is "best day ever," which is included at some point. My other colleague absolutely is like I don't want to say he's a depressed guy. He just hates over emotion. So like he just hates whenever she says it. So we always email him. We're like, "Hey Bill, it's the best day ever, huh?" And he's like, because this other woman, he gets so frustrated. So it's funny. But no, I appreciate you hopping on right away. And yeah, you've been playing a lot of War Thunder too, which I think you've been enjoying. Right?
Yes. I've been very happy to. So we used to play War Thunder pretty frequently, and then fell off as we do with things. Then we get back on the horse, and yeah, it's been great. We've been playing as China. It's fun.
I like playing.
I feel like we've all
lower
been doing
ranks.
pretty well, and I like that too. Like it's like
Yeah,
the
I
skill.
completely agree.
Yeah, like the skill threshold is right, the fun threshold is right. We've been having fun shooting planes. On top of that, I just bought a cache of new games from GameStop because I saw that they had the deluxe edition of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I loved. So I decided to buy it because I only had a digital copy before then. And I also bought, but have not played, God of War. I'm trying to remember what the
God of
other,
War original or God of War the new
the
one?
latest one, which is like
Okay, yeah, 4.
the name. It's God of War.
God of War
Ah!
4, boy.exe. Boy!
I was gonna say the Norse one, but that also works. I also bought Kingdom Hearts 3, which again haven't played. I never finished Kingdom Hearts 2. And The Outer Worlds, which I'm very excited about,
Ooh,
which is an
it's a lot of
Obsidian
fun.
game. Have you played it?
I have.
Ooh.
Yeah,
All right.
I really like it. We'll talk about it when you get into it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm gonna play it and we're gonna have some talks. But that's basically it. Been doing my mobile game, got my War Hero Reagan. I'm enjoying him. That's about it there. So I have talked for way too long, just like every episode of this, every time I open my
Not
mouth.
at all.
So
all.
I'll throw it over to Megan. What are you drinking and what have you been playing?
As always, I'm enjoying a Wegmans purified bottled water.
I'm feeling slightly upset with Pinto right now because he failed to mention the fact that we are playing The Last of Us together.
That's right. I'm sorry.
Wow.
My
Whatever.
apologies.
No, whatever.
Everyone,
What a
everyone
jerk.
give him the
It's
eye.
fine. It's fine.
No, but yeah, we started playing through The Last of Us in anticipation for The Last of Us Part 2, which, I mean, by the time this episode comes out, I think we'll have already started to play it.
Probably,
Part
yeah.
2?
By the time
Yeah.
this comes out, that game will be out. And
Yeah.
also, videos of Megan and I playing The Last of Us 1 will be up on the JoyPad YouTube channel.
That they will.
Ha-ha.
Where
Check
Pinto
out those
uses
videos.
all of the resources.
Unintentionally this time. Usually I did it just to troll you, but this time I was like, I didn't use all that ammo, did I? Oh my god, I did. I'm
3
so
bullets
sorry.
left.
I'm sorry. I apologize this time.
But yeah,
Since you
we're
guys brought it
sorry.
up. I just wanted to ask, when is the release date for The Last of Us 2?
the 19th.
Yeah.
Oh my
June.
god, we're already so close. Like even
Yeah.
it'll be out by the time this episode is out.
Oh, for
but
sure.
right now at this point in time, I'm like freaking out at how close that
We're
date is.
just over what, 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away. It's
3
incredible.
weeks, yeah.
It's so
Absurd.
exciting.
Yeah.
The same day as
I-
the new Protest the Hero album. Hooray!
Ooh, I'm also excited about that.
I solved
actually-
my shipping issue with Best Buy. I solved their puzzle, so life is good. They alerted me earlier last week that I would not be able to pick up my super duper collector's edition in the store, because COVID, and that I could
Yeah.
have it shipped to my home instead. And when I tried to change it to ship, they're like, no, you can't do that anymore. So I had to call them. Got a
They're
call
gonna
back
send it
like
over the
2.5
internet.
hours later.
They're going to
Fight a
email it
Minotaur.
to you.
Yeah, yep. But that's settled. But yeah, we're playing The Last of Us, and I shelved Fallen Order for now. I wasn't feeling it. And I
I-
did start Borderlands 3.
So how far did you get in Fallen Order?
Not far.
Like one planet?
One planet.
That's about where I felt like shelving it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is why I waited to buy it. So I'm going to interject because you guys mentioned it. I was like, I really want to play a good Star Wars game. I used to play, oh man, it's going back a long way, but it was like the Phantom Menace. Like it was,
the
the game I'm
PlayStation
talking
1
about?
game?
The Obi-Wan
Yeah, the
game,
PlayStation
right?
1,
Yeah, I
Obi-Wan
remember
game.
that.
That's
Yeah.
not a good game. That game's
I love
garbage.
that
Listen,
game.
back in the day, that game was awesome.
Gold.
That game was
All right.
incredible when I was a kid.
Try and play it now though. Ooh.
Okay. Maybe you're saying the Obi-Wan game, and I'm saying yeah, because Obi-Wan's in it. But I'm pretty sure you play as like Qui-Gon Jinn. You also do the.
I think you play as Jar Jar.
Roderick saying,
Yeah, you play as pretty much everybody at some point. I'll find the exact game name for you guys later.
The
But it
part
was
I
on the
remember-
PlayStation.
is being Obi-Wan and deflecting blaster bolts back into the Roger robots. That's what I remember.
Yeah,
So
the
that's
droids.
why it's the Obi-Wan game to me. Sorry.
Yeah, but it was on PlayStation. It was a good game. I love that. So like, when you guys mentioned Fallen Order, I was like, I really want to play a game where I'm just the guy with a laser sword and I'm like ready to kick butt. And
My childhood fantasies.
yeah, my childhood fantasy. I could be like getting up, like walking out of my office and just be like zoom, zoom, after I play, you know?
I'm telling you guys what we should do sometime, and I don't know if you ever will, because it's my genre of game and you guys aren't as into it as I am, but there exists the Star Wars The Old Republic MMO, which is free to play, and it's basically Knights of the Old Republic 3, and it has story-driven dialogue and full quests for 8 different classes, both on a Jedi and a Sith side. It's been out since like 2012, late 2012. And the story is actually good until you complete it, and then the end game. I don't like end game and raids and stuff like that in MMOs, but I actually enjoy the fully voiceovered story and having laser swords, like you said. Like it's actually fun to run around with like laser swords.
Yeah. So you guys mentioned it. I was like, I want to get this game, but like since it was just released, it was very expensive. I was like, you know what? We're gonna talk about it. We're definitely gonna talk about it. And hearing you guys saying we're shelving it for now makes me think I don't need it. So I'll wait
shelved
for
it
another
a while ago.
I'll
I
go
haven't
back
felt
to
any
it.
urge to pick it back up.
Yeah, like one day maybe I'll do it, and I didn't pay full price for it. I actually bought it around Black Friday. There were a few games that I picked up on sale.
Lucky.
So it's taken me some time to actually get to it, but I wasn't super stoked on it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like I said, I found it better when I put it on easy because I felt my lightsaber was a lightsaber at that point. But it still felt clunky, and the puzzles were kind of not great in my opinion. So
I agree.
Cool. Well, I guess we'll go ahead.
I just want to jump in with some gaming news that will not be relevant by the time this episode comes out. But so I recently bought Dead by Daylight and I still haven't played it, but they recently announced a DLC with a new level, which actually frustrates me to no end. It's a Silent Hill level where the enemy player gets to control Pyramid Head and you get to control Cheryl Mason, who was the main character of Silent Hill 3. And it's being like endorsed by Konami. And on one hand, I'm like, I want to buy this so that I can show that I care about Silent Hill. And that's what a lot of people online are saying. They're saying, buy this to show Konami that Silent Hill is, as an IP, is still super interesting and we want more Silent Hill. But at the same time, use
it for Pachinko.
I don't want to buy it because Konami sucks.
Well, what's the difference in buying a Silent Hill DLC for Dead by Daylight and buying Metal Gear Survive? Because if you buy Metal Gear Survive with that same logic, that's you saying, "Oh, I care about Metal Gear Solid," but it's also just a terrible, terrible game that no one should ever buy.
I don't think it really deserves the Metal Gear name.
No, it doesn't.
Like that was, I think, the main selling point. Oh, Metal Gear. That was it.
Yeah, it's just the name. So yeah, I'm torn on that. I don't know. What do you guys think about that, just in general?
Said my piece.
So you haven't played. Here's. I think if you like a game specifically, and specifically in this case, Dead by Daylight, then you should get it. If you don't like that game, then I don't see a reason to purchase the DLC.
Right.
In a show of support, because let's be honest, it's not gonna probably make a difference one way or another for the big business people at Konami to decide we're gonna make a new game. You know, I think it's probably just a way for them to use the IP without really having to do a lot of investment on it. So I would say don't get it yet. It will probably become cheaper, and play at least the first part of the game so you kind of know, hey, I like Dead by Daylight, so I'm gonna like this. It's the same as like. Say you weren't playing, the Walking Dead Telltale game. You were playing some other kind of game, maybe a zombie game, and they're like, hey, we put the characters of that into our game, our zombie game or whatever, and it's an agreement patch or whatever. In that case, I still would say, even though you loved The Walking Dead, the Telltale story, you wouldn't want to just buy that DLC if you've never played some other game. So. Just personal opinion, I would not personally buy that DLC until at least you've played a couple hours of the original.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I would also like to say, hey, if any of you three want to get Dead by Daylight so I don't have to play it alone.
You know, we have talked so much about how many games we all need to get so we can all play together every single game. So yes, I'll end up getting it, but
Me too,
we gotta
probably.
narrow down our focus here on a couple games at a time.
That's
Um,
true.
All of the games.
But no,
No.
I never got Dead by Daylight, so I
Well,
don't even know
it's like a
too much about it.
4v1 survival game where one player controls the
Yeah,
big enemy and the other four people control the players that need to survive.
yeah.
Just that.
I actually like games like that. There was another one that I loved of that kind of variety. I think it was called The Forest. Is that right? Is that the
Oh,
name of the
yeah.
game? That one
That
looked really
that is the
interesting.
name. Oh, we talked about that the other night.
We did talk about that the other night,
Yeah,
you and me.
because it was
Yeah.
on sale and I was like, I've heard good things about this game. Maybe I
And
should
then we
get
didn't
that.
get it on
And then I
sale.
didn't get it. But
that's another game of a 4v1 kind of variety that sounded really interesting too.
yeah,
So
it's survival
I
horror
don't know.
though, as is Dead by Daylight, which
Yeah.
is much more
Calm.
my wheelhouse than you guys. So
It's in my wheelhouse too, with the exception of like you mentioned Silent Hill. I actually don't like Silent Hill too much, just because it's more of a psychological scare
mhm.
than a just scare in general, like Amnesia. Amnesia is just in my opinion more of a regular kind of scare,
Yeah,
whereas these other games we've talked about, they're much more like psychological, like things are happening around you but aren't actually happening. So just personal opinion,
that's
I'm
the kind of
not a
stuff
bigger fan
I
of
adore. But yeah,
them.
and Megan
I
too,
don't
I
like the
think.
spooky games.
Yeah.
It's spooky.
Yeah. While you guys are doing that, Tom and I want our laser swords and we want to fight
Yeah.
back.
Oh my
Yeah.
god. Can you imagine like Dead by Daylight, but like there's just a lightsaber that you can grab?
But then it's not horror. Yeah, it
course.
it fails to be horror at that point because you're like, I can just cut everything into pieces.
Exactly. It would be weird. I like
Like-
weird, goofy stuff.
Horror games, I love and hate horror games where you can't fight back. Like
Yeah.
Amnesia, I love it because I'm like, oh my god, all I can do is run and be scared and basically be like
Outlast.
a deer or
Pee my
something, outlast
pants.
everybody else. But those other ones like Resident Evil, for example, or even kind of like Last of Us, where you can fight back on things. It's kind of like it's not as scary then for me.
Mhm.
It's much more
Agreed.
storytelling based. So super interesting how they do that stuff. Anyway, that actually leads into our topic, and I know we're about
About
a
20 minutes.
about a third of the way through our podcast. So
That's usually the way it goes.
it is the way it goes. But I actually have an interesting topic tonight. We've talked about a lot of different games, and some of the games we've kind of breezed over. So I want to take this episode to talk about stories, and specifically what makes a good story in any kind of game you want to talk about. Like it could be something like Amnesia, it could be something like an RPG, it could be something that's more adventure or action, like a Star Wars kind of game or something. But just think to yourselves what makes great games and also what makes bad games, and kind of give examples of those. Tell me what you're hearing. And the reason I'm asking that is actually because I mentioned in one of our first episodes that I thought, and maybe I'm still not wrong because I actually didn't research it for very long. Forgive me if I'm wrong, ultimately, people that listen to this. But I thought an RPG Maker was coming out pretty soon. And actually, one came out like 2 years ago, and I just totally missed it. So the reason, and I ended up getting it, and I was kind of like, I used to love this as a kid. I loved making games, but I never had the story part of it right. I could figure out the tool set, I could figure out how to build different things, but I couldn't figure out how to, make a story that was compelling. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. What is a compelling story to you? What's a bad story to you? Because I think that is critical in almost any game you play. If you're playing any kind of game with a story and it's bad, as good as the gameplay can be, it typically is not going to be a game that keeps you there and keeps you focused. So any examples, anyone? Because I don't have too many.
I think, well, that's what I was going to say. I feel like this is a topic that we could probably return to over and over again, like every once in a while, because a lot, we're probably going to hone in on specific games rather than, a whole like overarching this is what I think makes a story good. It'll be, this is what made this story good to me. But we might end up doing both. I see. It's interesting because, like, take a game like Stardew Valley, for example. It kind of has a story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, it's not really the focal point of the game, and yet I still found myself like, I want to get to know all these people, like all the villagers, because that's part of the story, in my opinion. You know,
It
like,
is.
yeah, like we've been playing it, and we're like, you know what? And I did this on my own time too. I'm going to get up to 10 hearts with all the villagers. I'm going to make everyone love me, and I'm going to lead all of them on and break, 11 people's hearts when I marry one of them. But
Monster.
like, you get to know every single character, and being like, and finding that stuff out about those villagers is like, oh, that's pretty cool. It's kind of how the characters that you don't like end up transforming, because like we make fun of, like, particularly say Haley or Alex, and we're like, you're dumb and I don't like you as a person, but then you get to know them a little bit and you're like, oh, you're not so bad. And it's just like, even though I've played the game for 500 hours now or more, I still watch the cutscenes most of the time.
So I think, to answer the question in terms of Stardew Valley, it's kind of, is it as good without the story? And I think the answer is no.
Right.
Because it has a handful, and I think this is part of the stories. It has a handful of characters who have distinct personalities, and do distinct things that have an impact on your experience. So through the events of the game, you get to know them, and their personalities change. Not necessarily that their personalities change, but you get to know them more, and maybe they're not what they initially appeared to be.
Why are
get to a
you the
deeper
way
level.
that you are?
Yes.
Who hurt you?
Alex, why did you decide to drink?
Do you think it
so
helps
much?
too that they're, I don't want to say characters is not the word I'm looking for, but do you
Almost
think
stereotypes,
that,
maybe?
yeah, they're kind of stereotypical, town people. Like, you have your jock, you have your kind of rich, girl that doesn't, I don't know if she's actually rich, but she disregards most people.
The
She's attractive.
fashionista, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that kind of goes into just natural human behavior, in the world, to kind of like relate those people to, people that or you've seen before? Like, what makes those people so interesting to you?
I think it hits your expectations, because I think there's like some little part of all of us that when we see a game in a graphical style like that, you almost expect it to go back to that earlier sense of gaming where you kind of had your Breakfast Club ensemble of characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it plays on that, because I don't think those characters last in those roles. I think they try to push the boundaries of what they are as a stereotype. So that's just my opinion on that.
Yeah, I think they initially start off as that stereotype, but like, once you're like, here, have 8,000 coconuts, now I know you better. And now, instead of being like, I threw away my old shoes because I didn't like the thought of someone wearing them, that made me feel weird, now you're like, I donated a ton of clothes the other night because other people should use the things that I'm not using. And it's small character development, but it's enough to make you be like, hey, you're a better person.
Well, that kind of goes into an interesting part of this topic, which is redemption. A lot of characters that, stand out to people often have some kind of redemption or
Yes.
major character shift. And you mentioned Breath of Fire multiple times, and I have not played Breath of Fire in a long time. But do you think there's character examples there that kind of,
Oh yeah.
lead to that kind of stuff. Yeah.
In Breath of Fire 3, there's a character named Gar who basically his entire story arc is about redemption, and like I kind of don't want to go into it too much in case people are planning on playing the game, but um yeah, basically his whole story arc is figuring out that everything he did early on in his life was wrong, and he hates who he was, and he wants to try and repair the damage as much as he can. And that involves like his relationship with the main character, and is his entire motivation for being on the journey. His motivation is not, oh, I want to save the world. His motivation is, I need to fix the things that I did wrong in the past.
I kind of like stories like that. I mean, it's there's kind of a similar arc in Cecil from Final Fantasy IV.
Yes.
Beginning is the Dark Knight with the bombing of Mysidia,
Mhm.
the unwitting bombing of Mysidia, but an unwitting bombing is still a bombing. And then taking the path to become the paladin. So I mean, I think that's probably a pretty early example of that sort of arc of redemption, and even a longer arc for Cain, who plays into Golbez's traps over and over again, and duels with Seth over Rosa. So I think that sort of redemption arc is there in a lot of games. I think it's a pretty common theme just in humanity and storytelling. But ultimately, I think even if it's not a redemption arc, like a character being someone who they weren't at the beginning of the story, I think that is normally a hallmark of a good story. Just learning something, growing,
Yeah.
evolving.
I mean, like,
I think that's just a fundamental good narrative.
yeah, like Megan and I have been playing The Last of Us. I mean, that's a very redemption heavy story, mostly
Mhm.
for Joel, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we can all kind of agree on that, despite how the game ended. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was just thinking about it. You brought
I
me to
mean-
a dark place, man.
Sorry,
I-
you mentioned the ending, and I'm kind of like, yeah, he lied to her, but at the same time, like he's trying to protect her. So
Right. It's a gray area. For
yeah,
sure.
I don't know.
I think they
I-
like redemption, or they definitely evolved, both of them. They learned to trust other people and trust one another.
I just think like maybe as a counterpoint to like the idea of like characters that redeem or evolve, like if you consider games like Skyrim or Fallout where you play more of like a
Yeah.
tabula rasa blank slate character, like there's a difference between a character that goes on a journey and is something at the beginning that grows and becomes something else, like a Joel, compared to a Dovahkiin who's just some guy that learns that he can yell dragon stuff and do cool things. And is whoever you imagine him to be, but you can't really express that personality very well. And then at the end, he's the same guy that you imagined him to be in the beginning, only he has 5,000 pounds of really cool epic gear that he stole from caves and took off of dead people.
Yeah.
Well, Skyrim has a story, but it doesn't have, it has main characters, but nothing like your character, like you said, is that blank slate. You can kind of make him as you want, and it's pretty much up to your imagination to kind of think about how you should respond to things, how you should
Yeah.
play out certain scenes or
Yeah.
scenarios.
Yeah, something like Skyrim, I don't know, maybe Fallout. I don't know that I would fall in love with a lot of the NPCs that I encounter. Fallout more, I feel like a lot of the NPCs are fleshed out, more so than Skyrim, but for games like that, it's more about creating this character that I want to be in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's not to say that Skyrim is a bad game by any
No.
means. It's just
Yeah.
that in terms of like character development, if you're looking for a character path, it's not
Mhm.
really there. It's a different sort of experience. And I think honestly, to me, I think the story of a Skyrim suffers from that a little bit because it doesn't have a distinct character to play off of.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Whereas a game like one of my personal favorite series of all time is Mass Effect, which has a huge, very deep story with very deep characters. Even the main
Yeah.
character, Shepard, who is kind of a blank slate character, but still, voiced, but still many choices, the options to go good, bad, and in between. I feel like you really kind of get attached to your shepherd's path, and there are moral choices to make along the way that really shape that character more than like.
And I
a
wonder
different game or
why
something like
that, yeah, why, I wonder, I don't really understand why that is. That's actually a great example of a game where I got really attached to my shepherd, and how he acted and everything. Who he was going to be interested in romantically, and who he's got, like what decisions he's going to make on certain missions or certain, events throughout the game. But I wonder why it's that, I felt attached to him, but I did not feel attached in the same way to my Skyrim character. And I don't know if maybe that's because Skyrim's very like replayable, and that I played Mass Effect through once, I think, maybe twice, but I didn't really want to go back to it. Whereas Skyrim, since it is so open world, it's kind of like this time I'm gonna, go on the first, like as soon as I'm done the first opening quest, I'm gonna go and get drunk at the bar and end up, like dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of miles away from where I started. It's almost like you can kind of make it as you want. You could, Mass Effect I think had a pretty, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, a pretty standard timeline. Whereas Skyrim, you could complete things however you wanted. You could, like Megan's mentioned before, she never even completed you never completed the main objective.
And there are no
either.
consequences. Like there's no sense of urgency to complete anything.
I think that's it exactly. And I think in a Mass Effect, your choices have very strong and lasting impacts. Whereas in Skyrim, the urgency isn't there. But in Mass Effect, if you decide to do this mission, too early or too late, your crew might get abducted by Reapers. You might lose half your crew, all of your crew. You might lose none of them if you go fast enough to save them. But you might also never meet Legion if you go to save them right away, and you don't take enough time. So I mean, there's a lot of those sort of critical moments, which I think are really cool. And I don't think you can get those in a game that's as sandboxy as like a Skyrim or something like that. And nor do I think it's really possible unless you invest a ton of development effort into that. And there's already a ton of development effort in Skyrim, and it's a great game and it's fine.
Yeah.
I think in terms of, story, you're gonna win with a more linear story that has solid plot beats and impactful choices. So I think that's where like you can still have a character that's shapeable like a shepherd versus a Dovahkiin kind of thing. Sorry, my mother-in-law decided now would be a great time to text me some sort of laugh video. I'm going to shut off the volume on my phone. But yeah, I mean, like, but even in the NPCs in Mass Effect, I was really attached to. I think part of that is the same thing as Episode 1, vibrancy. There's so much flavor and character in each of those NPCs. Garrus is immediately a very interesting character. Rex is immediately a very interesting character. A lot of the thought and backstory and I mean generations of backstory that were put into the ideas of these space alien races like the Krogans and the oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of Garrus's species and I can't. But just all the, I mean, even Tali's Quarians, where they had, they invented synthetic life forms, and then the synths drove them off their planet, and they can't, they could only survive in that ecosystem, so they all have to live in these suits, and they never, oh, and their society is based around spaceships, and they're clanned based on what ship they live in, and like, there's a mind-blowing level of detail to a world that is alive there, and I think being able to discover that history and dig into that history and feel the impact of that history as well on the game when you come into like cultural discussions and stuff like that. That's huge. I mean, that really is saying, we made a story and not just like, oh, here's a paperback with 20 pages in it, but like here's Encyclopedia Volume 1,
Yeah. Well, I think it's also, it's also important that if you're going to give someone a development, to their character, it means something, like you can't just be, oh, we're going to you mentioned Holly, right? From Mass Effect. We're going to, we're going to explain why she's, wearing a mask all the time, where she's wearing that full body armor. They go into a little more detail, and not only do they go into more detail about it, but they give events throughout the game where that is part of it. So you can have, for example, a romantic relationship with her, right? Where she's going to remove her mask, if I remember. I think I'm correct about all this, right?
You're right.
And like, that's character development. It kind of goes back to the original thing. It means something more than just she's taking her mask off, So like,
well,
I think
they introduce elements too where like her suit gets nicked and she's in danger because her body's getting exposed to the elements. Like,
God, you're making me want to play Mass Effect again.
It's such a good game.
It is a good game. I'm definitely interested in playing it. Yeah, and I think that's important too. So like, you don't give. So for example, we mentioned we had a whole special that this was last week where we talked about Final Fantasy VII Remake, and like some of the and I think not to rehash some of that, but like we mentioned, like Jessie, for example, has this not huge, but she has some character development in there of where she came from and stuff that helps drive home her, at least supposed at this point, death in the game, because you understand where she came from, that she has parents, that her father had this kind of incident with a reactor, that's made her the way she is. I think that stuff helps like define characters, so like I mentioned last week, if you don't have that stuff, it doesn't kill your story, but it definitely makes it not as that character as compelling. It doesn't make the actions and the events that they take as interesting. It's kind of like, oh, this person died. That was cool from that person died that you knew for a while perspective, but it doesn't mean as much to you until you realize this was as human of a person as possible.
I definitely. I mean, I think we can probably all agree that giving Jessie's dad the backstory of getting sick by way of Mako, and making that kind of a reason that she gave up some of her dreams as an actress to pursue eco-terrorism. It fleshes out the character. It's great. And
it gives them a reason to be there.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, otherwise, the original PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy VII, Jessie's just kind of there. Like, there's no backstory to that.
They're just kind of there.
She's still kind of flirty with Cloud. Not as much as in the remake, but it's definitely
never
there.
as much as in the remake.
Quite so in the remake. But
to take another aspect of story that I know we discussed in our Final Fantasy VII remake discussion, I think another thing that makes a story good is moving things along. I'm going to use a funny little thing here. I'm going to say by the invisible hand of economics or plot management as you see it. So, for example, where I really think that Final Fantasy VII Remake went awry was with the spooky ghosts that could make people live or die and conjure up super anime virtual dimensions that you get tossed into and fight ultra bosses. To me, that breaks my immersion into the game and the story. Whereas up to that point, there was a really good story that followed a theme, moved at an appropriate pace, and was guided by the logic of, trying to find Marlene, trying to rescue Tifa, trying to save Aerith, trying to escape from the Shinra building. All of these things that are a logical, movement forward. So I think that really, not relying on the character, the Kool-Aid man crashing through the wall, to set up your next plot point. Really makes for good stories, in my opinion.
So, Pinto, I think you are arguably the most RPG-esque of the four of us, I think. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. Maybe JRPGs, maybe not RPGs as a whole, but yeah.
What has been like bad story games for you where you either threw it down or you kind of were like, this doesn't make sense anymore for you?
Final Fantasy 13 probably. It's definitely my lower tier of Final Fantasy games. And a big part of it is not so much, I mean, I guess it is partly story, because that game throws you into the thick of things. Yeah. You know how, like, say you open up a fantasy novel, and if on the first page there's 20 made up words that they show you with no context of what they mean, I'm not going to read that book, because you can't just throw all this nonsense at me and be like, oh, you'll get it later. That's what Final Fantasy 13 did. It's like, oh, you're on a train to go fight the Pulse Fal'Cie, but you got turned into a Lassie, and it's just like, what does any of that mean?
There's
So it's a Clockwork
much.
Orange.
There's so much. It's not explained in the game. There's just a library that you go into in the menu, and it's just like, read this. We're not going to tell you that it's in there, but it's there. So go
And it's
read
dense.
this. It's super dense. The only story elements I really liked in that game was the story between Saz and Vanille. And, like, I don't know. I just feel like the characters weren't really that likable. They were they were stereotypes, and none of them really changed throughout the game, is the other thing. Lightning was the cold, hard mercenary, like Cloud, but her character development was like, I guess I'm less cold now. I don't know, maybe. Snow was the big macho hero who's in love and has to save his girl. And that's his entire arc. It doesn't change.
I want to pull back a little bit, because I think you mentioned something important when you talked about them just throwing all the dense terminology out there.
Throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
See if anyone reads it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if you have to have it be learned through a glossary and not through hands-on experience, you're doing it wrong. I think there are a lot of things, even when you look at a game like Final Fantasy VII Remake, that you don't necessarily know off the bat, but the game does a good job of introducing you to it. Materia.
Not tell.
Exactly.
Yes.
Show, don't tell, which is like the number one principle of all narrative. Again.
All media, yes.
But Materia, Mako, the life stream, Ancients, all of these are things that don't necessarily mean anything to you if you just see them written on a whiteboard somewhere, or if you just hear them in casual conversation. Midgar, what's a Midgar? Shinra, what's a Shinra? Who are these things? But why?
Right, right, exactly.
Sephiroth. I mean, that was my thing with Sephiroth, is they didn't do a great job of really building his character. They did an okay job, but I would argue that the PlayStation 1 did a better job.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's because, and I don't know if this is their thoughts on it, but it's like, ooh, intrigue by the next installment, and you get to find out, which is a garbage marketing tactic, in my opinion. But
I still think they're relying on previous knowledge from the past game. I think I've heard the argument, and I agree with it, that they're expecting the people playing Remake to
go buy the original. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And that's not unfair. It's been out for a while.
It is just a classic, but I understand.
But denseness, Final Fantasy VIII kind of had a lot of those issues too, where it was,
Yeah.
all of a sudden there's time compression and, oh, you were all kids at the same orphanage. And what?
Yeah,
I'm gesticulating wildly for anyone just seeing.
Yeah, that game was also very, very bad with its, first of all, its pacing, and second of all, yes, explaining things. The pacing, my goodness, I'm not allowed to curse, but I always just call Disc 3 just a bunch of stuff happens out of nowhere with zero context, and things just get crazy, and you're like, what is happening? And it's never really explained to you.
Yeah.
Nope.
You're just like, okay, this is happening. There's monsters falling from the moon. You're in space.
You go to space. Go to space just for fun.
Yeah, like,
why not? You come right back.
And if here's the thing, if you happen to find all the weird, obscure magazines, there's a magazine that's like, hey, that's where monsters come from, the moon. But like, you're not gonna find that, like, unless you're playing like games like Megan plays games. You're not gonna find that. You're just gonna like, why are there monsters falling from the moon? This was never established at any point.
No, it was all something that some story writer director had scribbled down in a notebook and never got around to establishing at a proper point in the story, and just decided to cram in there.
Monsters.
And that's the difference between
from moon? Question mark.
From moon? If the moon was made of bread. But that's again the difference between a good story, because a good story understands when it can't cram in the kitchen sink. It understands when to leave some of the fat on the cutting board table.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, that's I love harping on Mass Effect as a good example. Again, talking about the terminology thing, you don't know what the heck a Quarian is if you're just turning on the game for the first time. You don't know what a Turian is. You don't know what a Krogan is. You don't know what, all of these planets are. But they introduce it to you in a way where it makes sense. And you follow along pretty darn quickly, to be honest with you. So, that's, and it's not ham-fisted at you. There's not some character that just runs up and is like, hey man, did you know what a Quarian is? It's these people that wear these suits because they can't breathe our air. Isn't that something funny, Commander Shepard? Even though you should have known this from your 50 years at the Academy. Gee whiz, gotta go jump into space now, bye.
And you're like, thanks, Ghost Dad, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
to jump back to The Last of Us, something that I appreciate in those, in that game in particular, but in a lot of games too, is like the attention to where just enough detail is what you need. So like the relationship between Joel and Tommy, for example, you get just enough to know, about the relationship and kind of that fight, but you don't spend, 5 hours of gameplay, or maybe spend 5, because trying to think of how much time that stuff, but you don't spend an exorbitant amount of the game learning about their story, and history when you're at the dam. It's, you get to the dam, you do a couple things, you learn a little bit of backstory, and you're moving on, because that's a side quest, but it's essential to the story, which I think is really important. I don't really like side quests that don't expand upon the story in meaningful ways. If you're gonna do something that's kind of a jut out from the main storyline, it needs to have enough impact without getting in the way of where you actually want to go. So I think that's a great example, and one we've all played, so I know we all know it. A great example of where it's good, but it's just enough. You don't need more right now. And who knows? In The Last of Us 2, like we've speculated, we're probably going to see him again. We're probably going to learn a little more about their backstory.
Yeah, and I just to piggyback off of the side quest thing, I'm not too opposed if you have some side quests that aren't necessarily narrative driven or don't really advance the story. That's that's why they're on the side. I mean, I honestly I think we bring this up fairly often, but like getting a gold chocobo in Final Fantasy VII, well, you're taking a break from saving the world to go breed chickens to ride to go to an island where you can find Arthurian knights to summon in your fights. Uh,
Yeah.
even though you would have no idea of knowing
Tom,
that that's
when
where
you
that
say it like
is.
that, it just sounds weird. I don't know why.
Gee, I don't know why. But I'm completely okay with that because again, it's on the side. If you want to
Yeah.
just ignore that and focus on the story, you can, and
If
that's
it
fine.
breaks it up or even just enhances the world itself a little bit, gives you a little bit more information about where you're at, not even again the main story or the main characters, but just giving you something about your environment.
Well, when you think about the golden saucer stuff from 7, if they didn't add that stuff into the game, would golden saucer have really felt like a place? Really have felt interesting and compelling? I would probably say no. It wouldn't have been as much of a meaningful impact. So I'm happy that they expanded upon that. So they, those quests aren't necessary. You can beat the game completely without it. You really don't even learn that much if you do those kind of things, but it helps expand upon it. So like if you put a casino in your game, which Golden Saucer is pretty close to a casino,
Oh, it's
some
casino.
kind of arcade. If you don't let people play the games in the arcade or in the casino, it's not really a casino at that point. It's just another place that you walk to, and you had a couple bits of character development. You went on a date. You did a couple things like that. It doesn't land as much, even if it's on the side. So like I'm happy they included that, and we mentioned I really hope they still include that stuff. Whereas something like the Concord battles, I think there's one battle you have to do that's mandatory.
Yes.
If I remember
The
right,
one
there is one battle.
yeah, very close to the end of the game.
Yeah, but you don't have to do most of them. They're just kind of there for fun more than anything. So I appreciate when they like expand upon something to make it interesting and compelling, but it's not necessary to get the story done, to understand and have some kind of impact to the storyline and the trajectory towards, obviously the finish.
Well, it's still world building, right?
Yep.
I guess that's the point is it's still building the world that you're living in and trying to save. So
Yeah.
it makes it kind of matter if you have a gold chicken in a stable somewhere that you want to race for prize money, but the world's about to end. So you got to stop it so that you can go make that money off your gold chicken.
I'm just
That's my story. And I'm
what
sticking
about
to it.
like a lot of the God, we're just such Final Fantasy nerds, but a lot of the Final Fantasy games for say like the ultimate weapons in any of the games, all of that is considered a side quest that's like none of them have anything to do with the story for the most part ever. Like
No. Well, didn't they in 7 kind of tie into the characters a little bit? I mean, in 10 they definitely do. Like
they
Let's
do
ball.
With the weapons.
Blitzball,
true.
the lightning was like a fear of Riku's, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And
but you don't even do it for Riku's weapon. Like
is it
it's
not?
all-
Is that Lulu's?
it's Lulu's. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just
Maybe I revise my opinion on this.
I don't know.
No,
Well,
so we've mentioned another game to get off Final Fantasy kind of games.
thank you, because I was
like,
gonna
no,
do
it's
that
fine.
too.
There's a game I mentioned it once before called Subnautica. It's an underwater development world that has a really interesting story in the sense that it builds a world. Your character doesn't really get much development. You just kind of learn about the world and you have a situation that you're in, but you're effectively trying to get off the island or off the world, which is pretty cool. I think that Tom, you mentioning not even open worlds, but just world building and world development is arguably the most important thing. If you don't have a compelling world, as cool as your characters might be, as compelling as they might be, if your world isn't believable and isn't, fitting with and by world, I mean potentially multiple worlds if we talk about like a Star Wars or something. But if your place is not believable, then no matter what you kind of come up with storyline of your characters, whether they're redemption arcs or whether they're revenge arcs or whatever kind of arcs and everything that are out there, it lands flat. It lands very flat. Your world is arguably the most important piece because that's what everything is built upon.
Yes.
You have to care about a world in order to want to save it.
Mhm.
Yes.
And most of the time you're playing a video game, you want to save the world. Like that's what the game is about.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to bring up that I really like in any game of any genre, and that's the thing, as I like twists in gaming, but if the world is not built well, then the twist is gonna fall flat, and you're gonna be like, "That's dumb." Like Final Fantasy VI, what's the twist? The world ends halfway through the game, and it's only the halfway point. And when it happens, you're like, "Oh my god!" Knights of the Old Republic 1. There's a big twist in that game. You know what I'm talking about, Tom. When I played that game when I was like, I don't know, 12 or 13, and I got to that twist, I was like, holy bad word I'm not supposed to be saying at this age. Like, my gosh.
That character's in the Old Republic.
Oh, nice.
MMO, by the way. Very interesting.
There are definitely more examples I have, but they're all slipping from my mind. But just like, if you're going to have a big twist like that, if you haven't built up your world to where that twist is going to affect you, it's going to completely sour my opinion in the game or of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a twist. A twist, as many people have criticized M. Night Shyamalan for. A twist is not a movie.
No.
A twist can be a very effective mechanic, but you have to have. I would almost say the world is the groundwork, right? Like you kind of have to have. The world is the thing that you stand on.
First, you must create the universe.
Well, look at Tom. You've played Life is Strange, the first one, right?
Great
That game. It's not complex. Mechanics are super simple. You're a high school student going about your life, and just the twist at the end. Like the more the story unfolds. You have the huge storm. You have, I don't want to spoil it because I know, Pinto, you've talked about playing it.
I still want to play it.
There's a huge twist at the end.
Yep.
Or
and I was almost mad at it, but I enjoyed it. And I mean, like I played that game as the episodes were still coming out. So I was always left at the end of every episode with a kind of feeling of suspense and just a lot of emotion and wanting to know what was going to come next.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that came from the characters, and there are a number of characters in that game that are stereotypes and
for sure, absolutely
don't really care about them, but there are a number that you do care about, like Chloe, for example. I did not want to let anything bad happen to Chloe, so
no, not at all.
The end of the game asks you some very important questions in that regard.
Bay or bay?
Yes. Exactly. But Bay or Bay. But like even
depending on how you play it.
Exactly. But I think one of the good things that game did too was enforce its mechanics, because even early on it's a game that's about choice, right? And it makes it very clear at the very beginning that your choices matter, because even if you don't water your plant, the plant dries up.
Yeah.
So
and it could be simple, it could be huge.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes it pretty clear that, it matters, which is cool. That's a good point about story. The more something matters, the better your story is. It almost doesn't matter how minute it is. Like if you meet a guy with a red hat and you tell him that's a stupid hat, and next time you see him wearing a different hat, it's a better game.
It is. No, really, honestly.
Has anyone here played Braid by any chance?
No, but I've heard great things.
Okay, that is another game that has a huge twist, and it's not even a story-driven game, which is the interesting thing about it. It's basically a puzzle platformer. But when you reach the end of it, and I've played it, so I know what the twist is. You're like, oh, holy wow! Like it completely twists everything you've done the entire game. Like turns it around 100%, and it's just again, it's interesting because there's not much of a story, but
I think I've heard this twist
yeah,
before,
but
actually.
you've been controlling this character for so long, and then you get to the end and you hit that twist, and you're like, my entire perception of the game has been turned on its head.
Well, Undertale's kind of like that too.
Oh,
I know you've
actually,
played
yeah.
Undertale. Have either of you played or heard about
Haven't finished
Undertale?
it.
No.
It's okay. I won't spoil too much,
It's
but like
it's hard to spoil because it's hard to
Yeah.
explain everything, but yeah.
But again, I mean, I can't stress enough how much that game makes you love the characters in the game and how much effort is put into the liveliness and personalities of a monster world. I mean, it's so well thought out for something that was designed by a high schooler.
And the other thing about that game is like you're not going to play it the quote unquote correct way the first time. Unless you
already know.
Unless you already know. So it has a huge replayability factor. Because the game is going to be almost entirely different the second time you play it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched it played the right way. I never played it myself, but I watched it played the right way. And the group I saw playing it was going to play it the wrong way after that. And I went, I can't watch this.
No, you can't do that.
It'll hurt.
You're supposed, because in theory you're supposed to play it the wrong way first. Because that's just your natural inclination as a gamer with that style of game.
Right. And you know what? It makes it a better game that you have to put thought into it to play it the right way. I think there's an abundance of games that we can kind of pick up as a culture and not have to think twice about how am I going to play this game.
Super Mario Brothers, go right.
And yet I love Super Mario.
Oh, I do too. But to that point, there's a game called Default Dan on Steam that's a platformer where if you touch a coin, you die. It's like it completely throws how you normally play platformers into disarray.
That's
Suddenly,
awesome.
it's not like, oh, I want to collect all the coins, because that's just your natural inclination. Every platformer game you play, there's collectibles. You get the coins in Mario. You get the bananas in Donkey Kong Country.
Sonic hates that game.
You get the you get the rings in Sonic the Hedgehog. Then you play Default Dan, and if you're like, oh, there's 3 coins. Oops, I died. Which is kind of like a jerk thing to do. But once it happens once, you know about it. But then, even though you know about it, you're still fighting your instincts as a gamer of what's been pounded into you for the past, 20, 25 years of your life.
That's such an interesting kind of thing. It's the same as like when the first horror game we mentioned at the start came out, where the ones where you can't fight back, because every time it was always you can fight back against something, but these games started coming out of there's no way to fight back. All you can do is run and hide. That kind of mindset and complete turn on what typical gamers want to do, which is like fight back in that case. So that's super interesting.
You know what? I don't know why this just popped into my head. Maybe just with the idea of choices and running and hiding, being an option compared to violence, and even the thought of Undertale, where that's kind of the dichotomy of the ways that you can play. I kind of like when there's more of a motivation to the negative forces in the game. So, for example, I think one of the reasons I've fallen off with zombie games is that for the most part, a zombie is a mindless enemy that just kind of was created by a virus or something and is coming after you. But when you're playing a game and there is an active human thinking enemy that's plotting, to do something bad, and you're trying to thwart them, or even if they're just doing something small in a bad way to kick things off, and you're actively trying to combat that, and you have a reason to want to stop them, and they have a reason to try and do what they're trying to do, I think that makes for a better story too. You know, not to downplay characters like Kefka in Final Fantasy VI, who just kind of want to watch the world burn, a la the Joker. But you know, I really think it's interesting with characters like Sovereign in Mass Effect, and oh my gosh, it's escaping me the name of the main character that he's with in the beginning of that game, who's basically, you know, you kind of think he's the big bad, but then you find out he's being controlled by this other force. So I don't know. I just like it when there's motivation. I think motivation matters, particularly for bad guys.
But I don't like those like late twists like that though, where it's like, you know, oh, I'm gonna, you know, I finally beat what I think is the bad guy, but oh, he was being manipulated by this guy. You know, he's the bad guy. I'm like, come on, really?
Oh.
You know, I think the only reason it works in Mass Effect is because it was followed up and expanded on.
It does.
But I would agree with you if it were just on its own, and everyone's, you know, at the end of that game, everyone kind of looks at Shepard and goes like, really, a ship? You're trying to tell us a sentient ship trying to fight you?
I mean, not to make too many movie references, but we're all nerds here. I think all of us have seen all the Star Wars movies. But the whole idea of, oh, Palpatine's still the bad guy. Yeah, it's like,
Why?
come
So-
on.
So many
So-
opportunities
Come on.
missed.
Well, exactly. I mean, I can go on and on about some of the missed opportunities in Star Wars prequel trilogy and sequel trilogy, but I honestly I think the biggest miss there is to jump around all of the characters you already have.
Yep.
If you've already been introduced to all of these characters for 2 feature-length movies, don't introduce a character we haven't seen and have presumed dead for oh god, I don't know, 50 years almost, as, you know, a presumptive, you know, main villain. Don't do that. That's bad.
Yeah. Well,
Better
I am
move. Make
looking...
Kylo Ren awful. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I am looking at the clock, and we are about an hour into our podcast, which means unfortunately it's just about time to go. But I appreciate everybody's comments here, because like I said, a game project for myself is to create some kind of short story through RPG Maker at some point. Maybe I'll let these people play it and give their thoughts at some point. It's probably gonna be something I do more offhand anyway than I'm actually like setting a project timeline for myself. But I like those like short 30-day kind of projects, if you know what I'm talking about, where it's like, I'm gonna get this done. So it's like, you know, a case like that. So I appreciate the thoughts, because it gives me some ideas for what I could put in that kind of setting, or in that kind of game. It's pretty cool. But I appreciate the thoughts. Any final words on those things? Did I miss anything? No? You all are good?
Yeah, I don't
Cool.
think so.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week. It's whose topic is it next week?
Tom.
It's my topic.
It's Tom's
Tom's
topic.
Ooh.
Is there any teaser you can give us?
I don't know what topic I'm going to pick yet from my big list of topics.
That's a great teaser in its own right. All right. Well, then I'll cast this out here. Thanks everybody for watching. If you guys have any great story ideas, games that we should play that have great stories, leave comments in all of our various mediums for the podcast or the YouTube channel, all that kind of stuff. We'd love to hear it. In fact, when this cast comes out, we'll have The Last of Us 2, which, you know, will hopefully have a great story that we're all excited for to talk about too. So we're expecting some comments on that on this video. Appreciate all that. Check us out on Anchor, YouTube, and let's see, Instagram and Facebook, JoyPad Pod, right?
Yes.
Got it.
Check us out there. And Tom, why don't you cast us out with our little slogan?
All right. And a 1 and a 2 and a stay joyful, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.